This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. All right, Cynthia, I'm so excited that you're here today on the Hype Squad podcast. I'm going to read your intro real quick so everyone knows a little bit about you. Cynthia Mitchell founded Eka Earth in 2015 with the intention of bringing people back to nature. She lived aboard her 30-foot Pearson and sailed the Caribbean islands for 4 years. She then traveled through 15 countries with a desire to understand human existence on a level beyond what is presented to us through social media, news media, algorithms, billboards, and advertising. What she learned is that we're all the same regardless of religion, race, or cultural beliefs. All humans crave a life of happiness and ease, and in that, we are all the same. I've known Cynthia since we were kids, probably 25 plus years at this point. We drifted apart over time, as most friendships do, but the story of how our lives came back together is a perfect example of trusting the universe and divine timing. Cynthia, I'm so glad you're here today. Thanks for coming on. And I want to kind of finish that last sentence of your intro and kind of how we came back together. So first off, anything you want to add to the intro, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into that story.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here and to be reconnected. And like you said, the most, I feel like divine way. Yeah, no, nothing to add. I feel like that much sums up who I am. And I know we'll get like deeper as we carry on.
All right, cool. So I was telling Colby last night about recording this today and how excited I was. And I was remembering how I reached out to you to come and facilitate a yoga lesson for some friends of mine. We were at the beach and everyone wanted to do yoga. And I'd been following you on social media for years, it felt like at this point. So I knew that you were in the area and I knew you were doing all of this. And so I reached out, and I remember when you showed up that morning with all the blankets and all the stuff in your car, and I came out and saw you and hugged you, and it was the most surreal feeling for me because I think at that point I had not seen you. I mean, I don't even know if I can say how long, but like probably since our reunion, our 10-year high school reunion. I
Yeah.
saw you then. But even before that, it had been 10 plus years since I had seen you because we drifted apart in high school. And I remember having watched you on social media, I had kind of this idea of what your life was and where you were and all this kind of stuff, and thinking, she's probably so much different than what I remember. And from the moment I laid eyes on you and like heard your voice and started talking to you, it was like, holy shit, she's the exact same person that I remember from high school. Like, you sounded the same, your mannerisms, and I still joke about that to this day. But I remember that being such a good, surreal feeling. And then, cut to, I message you and I'm like, I really want to get my headstand, and can you teach me how to do it? And then you bring me into the Marco Polo world, which I don't even know what I did without it before. And then it just kind of went from there. I want to hear a little bit about your perspective of like us coming back together at the very beginning of it.
Yeah. So obviously when you reached out, I was like, fuck yeah, like, yes, do yoga with you and your friends. And like, um, because same, like we've talked about this, like, I don't even know exactly why we drifted apart in high school. I guess it happens. But did kind of like stay connected. And so I was also watching you on socials, as you do other people, right? And like seeing, okay, this person is traveled and well versed as well, and like admiring that and being like, already before any of this was even a thought about you, was like, fuck yes, like this person got out. She got out. She left our small town. She's living her life, like pride for that, and that shared experience that I know, like, even though we weren't talking a lot, that could see that, because I think a lot of people, not that there's anything wrong with staying in your small hometown, but there's just so much, just a
Out
different lens.
there.
There's so much out there and a different lens that you develop, having gone to different countries, seen different cultures. So I was like super stoked when you reached out, and felt immediately the same, like that draw, that connection, that like familiar, homey feeling with you that um, we always had. I mean, we were
Mm-hmm.
young. Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like middle school, was it Miss Laramore's class? Fifth
So
grade?
I remember being in Miss Larimore's class with you, and I was trying to figure out how old we were. And when you lived close to me on Kinesville, I don't
That was
remember how.
because I remember picking you up on my first day of driving to school in my yellow Sunfire.
Yes, but I remember even before that when your mom had the Jeep and you would do your makeup in the Jeep. Um, yeah, yeah, agreed. Like we were always drawn to each other, and going back to what you said about how we drifted apart. That's the ironic part is we've talked about that and neither one of us can remember like specifically what happened, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it is that you never really remember like the straw that broke the camel's back type of thing of why you like totally drifted apart. But to me, that's not important. And the important part is that we came back together and we reconnected and like this adult version of us is like right for each other type of thing.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And so then when you reached out on headstand thing, I was even more like, yes, because this is obviously my passion. And like, I get to share that with someone who I'm admiring and like happy to have back in my life. So, like, I'm going to take as much time with you as I can. And Marco Polo, for anyone that doesn't know Marco Polo, welcome Marco Polo into your life, especially if you're a busy mom, adult, like multitasking. Marco Polo is the way to go. And yeah, so then seeing that, like, okay, she's going to talk back to me, like she's going to engage in Marco Polo. So it's basically a video messaging app, and you can go back and forth, and it never disappears. So it's like a text, right? Um, and then seeing your progress, you were like updating me on your headstand. So then I'm already like hyping and being excited. And then it was, for me, it was like such a godsend that you came back in my life when you did, because I was not in a very empowered place. And then you were asking me to do things that made me remember my power, like teaching headstand. And then, I got to work with your husband's job and
Mm-hmm.
work, like meet all of those people and have that extended experience, reconnect with you again. Um, and then connect with even more of our high school friends that I had also kind of like.
That's right. Yeah, you came on our little girls trip. Yeah. I'd forgotten
Yeah.
about that.
And so that was like another, like, it was very nostalgic for me and like heartwarming, because along with, you know, traveling and moving as much as I have in my adult life, like getting back to that core group of friends was so like um mushy and cozy.
Mhm.
Everyone's the same, like that feeling, and just a reminder of like, God, these women have been through so much together. Like the four of y'all have witnessed and grown and stayed connected and really committed to each
Mhm.
other. And that's like something that you don't always get when you're moving around so much, you know.
Yeah, and I want to anyone who's listening who doesn't know the situation, like your background, you lived on a sailboat. You moved around. You moved to South Florida like right after we finished high school and then you lived on a sailboat. So it wasn't that you drifted like you weren't like friends with any of these people. You just were gone for a really long like you're still really close to Amanda and stuff like that. And the core group that you're talking about was our core group from high school that we all hung out. And so, yeah, it's so nostalgic for me, even though we stay in like constant contact. It's still super nostalgic to have all of our kids there. And you brought Lemmy and everyone got to play. And I do remember that being like such a sweet full circle moment of like, oh my God, look at us. Like, we're doing it. Look at this
Yeah.
life, right?
And the sacredness of that female companionship was so, and I've developed friendships, you know, like with adult friends, but those childhood friends, like, how special
It
and
hits
sacred
different.
it is.
Yeah, even like you and I talking, having the memories of childhood and being able to go back and like pull on those, it's sacred. It really is. And I feel super super grateful and fortunate that I do still have friends from childhood. I know a lot of people are not all in that situation. And it does hit different. Like friends that you make as adults, as the adult version of yourself, are sacred in and of themselves because you find them on your own and you have to work for it. And that's a whole nother beast in and of itself. But the people who knew you as children and have been along for the ride the entire way and can like bring up old shit from high school. Like, you remember when you did that stupid shit? Like, I knew you back then. Like, right? I mean, the version of me that my husband doesn't even know, right? And that is,
Like, no one knows that part. No one
yeah.
knows me, and it's so effortless.
I know, I know. Well, like, and just as like a little side note, we were talking about this the other day, Cynthia and I were, about all of this big group of core girls making this Jerry Springer recording at my house, and like everyone had a different character. And it's just like, and we've even talked about this because we both have daughters. Like, we pray to whoever we pray to that our kids get to experience that type of fun and creativity with your friends, because social media was not a thing and the internet wasn't even that big. It was still dial up. Like, you really had to be creative and you were like singing karaoke and making videos. And I hope that our kids have something like that to be able to remember from their childhood, because it is such a special memory. I want to go back a little bit because it was really important for me for you to come on to the Hype Squad podcast and be my first guest. And this will be the first one that we air, as far as like a guest podcast. And I remember, and hearing you talk about me empowering you, you did the same for me. And I was very vocal about um how encouraging it was to have you in my corner to go to for feedback and input, like all of the things, because I highly highly regard you as a facilitator. And you just mentioned it briefly, but I reached out to you to come and facilitate yoga for a group of friends, and then my husband witnessed your ability to read the room, which is a whole nother gift that I will talk about in a separate episode, and was totally enamored by your ability and brought you in to do a facilitated event for his management group, because he knew that you were able to see people in the group and say, okay, none of these people have ever done yoga, but I can talk to these people. And immediately trusted you of anyone to come in and facilitate that for him. And he was blown away by your ability to do that. And I have been watching you on social media between Eka Earth and now your photography and the ability that you have to hold space for people and support people. And I needed like a guru in my corner to like talk me through ideas. And you did that for me. And that shit is so powerful. And I remember you and I talking about this on Marco Polo, which Marco Polo sponsored this podcast probably. um, and I remember us having this very distinct conversation about, I think you said at one point, and I know I've said multiple times, like, I needed to celebrate a win, and you were the only person I thought about coming on and telling. And that's kind of where the idea for this entire podcast came from, was conversations between the two of us. And like, what the fuck? Why do women not have more places to go and celebrate themselves and hype themselves up and brag about what they're good at? Because most of the time when we were coming on to hype ourselves up to each other, it was because we were so empowered by something that we had done or felt really, really good at and were on fire about it and had no one else that would give us a safe space to share that. And I really wanted to highlight that in this conversation because I feel like that is where this all came, and who knows what this will turn into or what this looks like in the future. But I want people to be reminded, any women or anybody listening to this podcast, that the people you have in your corner, the women specifically that you have in your life that can build you up, hype you up, support you, is magnetic and really hard to describe how powerful it is. So I want to hear a little bit from you, Cynthia, about like how that felt for you to have somebody in your corner and all of that and what it entailed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like, I remember the moment on Marco Polo when I think we both were like, ding, 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 like, this is it. Like, this is the podcast. Like, this is, you have to do this. Because it was like, I was coming on to like something I would be excited about or would happen and I'd want to share. And I have so many friends that love me and that would be excited to hear about this, but there was something unique about how you hold space for women as well, that made me know that this was like this is my go-to person for bragging about myself, for lack of better terms, or for just layman terms, like, and that feeling was recognizable. Like, I don't know that I would ever go to someone else and be like, hey, guess what just happened? Like, I just did this. It would be one of those things that I like am aware of myself, but maybe like didn't automatically need to share with someone. But knowing that like I had someone to be proud of myself with was a recognizable, and like that's a person I need to invest in with in scope of relationship, like in friendship, like this is valuable. And then the flip side of that coin being like, why, and why is that not more normal? And that's what I think is a big topic for this space, this container of like, how do we make it more accessible to for that feeling, that sensation to be more normal for all women? Because all different types, life struggles, experiences, views, it doesn't matter what you're going through. There's times in your life when we need to be able to say, I've done a good job, and have someone validate that truly sees you and holds no judgment or need to imply their own perspective on how you should have done it or why you should have done it or why did you do it that way, like, and just fully cheer for you.
Mm.
And that's what I feel like you offer so well in your coaching and in just your friendships, just in who you are naturally as a person. And I really value.
That's sweet. Um, Thank you for that. You mentioned coaching, and I want to see how much you want to volunteer about our coaching together, because I did do some, I mean, you did coaching for me too on a different level, but I did do like coaching sessions with you as the client. And I'm interested if you're willing to share kind of what your perspective was, not only working with me, but what it was like to have like a hype girl in your corner as a coach. And you can talk more about like my way of doing it, and that you had homework and I would hold you accountable and things like that. How was that different for you? Because I know you've tried other modalities, depending on how much you want to share, and how coaching may have been a little different for you.
Yeah, so in terms of other modalities, if it's a modality of healing, I've tried it, from like retreats to water cleanses for days to like journaling every day to sitting in stillness for an hour a day. Like, all, if it is supposed to heal you, I have tried it. If it's a way to make yourself be accountable, I have tried it. This is the realm and the industry that I've been working in for 10, 15 years now. And so when you offered to do some coaching work, I was like, sure, yes, because I haven't done much of that. That's a new modality for me. And one thing I definitely want to highlight and I'll come back to my personal experience, but one of the really good things that I really enjoyed about working with you was, and I was recently having a conversation with my friend Andrea about this, not wanting to say what others are, in my opinion, doing not well and only speaking of the well. So I'm being very specific with my language right now. There's a lot of people that become coaches without fully educating themselves and staying in their scope of practice. And I have witnessed and or had some experiences in similar modalities where people do that, and then whoever is on the receiving end doesn't receive it to the maximum potential that they could receive, and or is unfortunately damaged in a way, or more trauma is caused because we're not staying in our scope. And so working with you from the very beginning, being one of your first clients, I feel like I got to witness your integrity and your ability to know how and when. I'm not educated in this, so I'm not going to offer this to you. Or I know actually I need to deepen my education on this. So what do I need to learn before I'm actually sharing this? And the time and intention that you put behind developing your coaching program is, in my opinion, like sets you miles apart from that label. Because that label is a label that, let's be honest, anyone can take on. Like there's no laws or regulations around that word. So yeah, so and then in my personal experience, like I'll share a little bit of where I was. I was pregnant with my second kid.
Yeah. You found out you were pregnant like right when we started working together. Yeah.
And so that was a huge like, oh, for me. That wasn't a planned experience, or so that was an undertaking in itself. And then my relationship that I was in was not working, and I was really stressed and really broken, and just not in a stable may not be the right word, structured mindset to where I could pick apart what I needed from coaching. Like I didn't even know, I just knew I needed help because I was not able to help myself in terms of like forward day-to-day thinking, and in the laundry list that comes along with like having a small child, kind of being a stay-at-home mom, working part-time while you're pregnant, trying to still hold your business afloat. So having someone that could meet me where I was and shift from session to session and provide insight that I couldn't see. So like one of my favorite things that was always a takeaway from every session, and is still in our friendship existing, is your ability to stay the hype girl and to always find the silver lining, and like always find okay, well, I hear that this is a problem, or this is an issue, or this is what we're looking at, but let me remind you, this is also like, I hear this in you, I'm seeing this growth. And that reminder was such a, let me keep you afloat. Like it was like the buoy, like keeping me afloat. The like, oh yeah, like I was so buried in where I was, I couldn't see the wins. I couldn't see the progress. Like, so that was super impactful. And I felt like personally, and I don't know, being on the other side of coaching, but like every session it was like, well, we started with this and this is what we were working on this week, but this week we are completely on to something else, and I'm Cynthia, we're just gonna roll with this. Like that's how I felt like you were going with me, where maybe most people would probably be like, this is what I want to work on, and we're gonna work on this all the time, where I was like an octopus arms, like all these different, and you were able to kind of like, all right, this is what seems is the most important, and then we should probably prioritize this week, and then giving me on the fly, or what seemed on the fly to me, um, tools to work with or to help regulate or to help make it to the next week.
Yeah. You made the reference to an octopus like being all over the place. And the funny part is all of my clients are like that. Because I think that's the human existence. Like that's the human experience, and everyone experiences that to some degree. And it's funny because when I first started coaching, I would prep for my calls. I would make like a spreadsheet of what their goals were and like and then like a couple of months into coaching people, I threw that shit completely out the window and was like, I'm going to show up, because if I come into coaching sessions too prepared, meaning I have an agenda for what we're going to talk about, that's not their coaching session. That's me inserting my ego and what do I want this to happen. That's not what they need. They need me to just support and hold space and listen to them. And in real time, kind of fly by the seat of my pants. Let's just see what's happening. And I'm going to give you real time feedback, because you can't prepare for stuff like that. And I always say to all of my new clients that, you may put on this intake form that this is what you want to work on. And we may get into our first or second session and that shit flies out the window so fast, because that's just what you felt comfortable getting on paper. And my job as your coach is to dig underneath that. Like, yeah, you may think that that's the problem, but let's back up 10 steps and see what happened before that. And I say this, I used to say all the time, I should have been a therapist. I should have been a therapist. And I feel like I've been coaching in some capacity my entire life. I just didn't have that vocabulary to go with it, because that's my comfort zone. My comfort zone is listening. My husband has said this forever, that he is so disturbed by my ability to meet a stranger and they're telling me their deepest, darkest secrets within, 5 to 10 minutes of meeting them. And I say to him all the time, I don't know what it is. Like I don't know how to stop it. Cause sometimes it's not a good thing, right? Like I can't be social. I'm in the corner with some woman who's like telling me everything. And Colby said, I'm over here. Like, come talk to me. Right. Um, and when it was actually my coach that pulled me into doing this work. I was owning and running a separate business, which we later sold. And I was not fulfilled in it and did not feel like I was living my purpose, but it was definitely unlocking something for me. And my coach dug into that and said, I think you need to be a coach. Like there's something here. We need to dig more into this. And he was the one that kind of lit that flame for me. And I remember him saying to me, if my daughter would have had you in her corner when she was in college, her experience would have been so vastly different. And I started this as like college girls being who I wanted to work with. And I do work with college girls. But what was a beautiful thing that happened is the women I have the most impact on are women like me, my age, older, some of them are younger, but kind of in that like 25 to 45 age range, that are moms or they're married or they're single for the first time. And I can relate to them on a different level. And it's like I'm their girlfriend who they only have to talk about themselves to. And there's something so powerful about that, that's so much bigger and in some ways better than just a normal friendship, because you get all the FaceTime. Like you get the entire stage. It's all you. I may give you some experience shares, but this is your show, right? And I'm here to support you. And then the Marco Polo, sponsored Marco Polo, that you brought into my life is now something I do with all of my clients, because it is a game changer as far as communication and being able to see your face and hear your voice just for yourself, not just for me listening. And I, I had a couple of friends that trusted me to hold space for them and support them. You were one of them in the very beginning of starting this business, where it was like, let me just get my feet wet and you give me the most honest feedback you could possibly give. And you were one of those people. And I will always be so grateful for that, because you gave me impeccable feedback for me to be able to go back and change, and even hyping me up, right? Like telling me the stuff I was really good at. Like right now, all of those things you said, like almost made me cry. They were beautiful to hear. And I love that, working with you and having you in my corner has been such a game changer for me. And I think, the idea behind this podcast was to have women come on and talk about what they're good at and hype up the things that because I remember us talking about you holding space for people specifically, which we'll talk about that separately. And I remember saying, like, you're so damn good at this. And you said, I don't remember exactly like how you articulate it, but what I remember receiving was, I know I've been doing it for a long time. I know I'm good at it. Like, and you weren't bragging about it necessarily, even though that's not a negative thing. But like when you said it, I was like, yeah, you are, like, and I'm so glad that you're not caveating that with, oh, well, you know how most women, like if you tell them they're good at something or you tell them they're beautiful, they caveat it with something like, oh, no, not today. I didn't even wash my hair. Like they say something that like
We're like, dismiss
negates
our,
it.
yeah, we dismiss our goodness.
Yeah. And I remember
Why?
one of the times I said that to you, you didn't do that. And I thought that that was so powerful to witness. And I've said this multiple times, like, and one of the reasons I thought this podcast could be successful is it only takes a few times of hearing other women talk really highly about themselves, and you start to feel more comfortable doing the same for yourself. And you also start re-examining the women around you. And if they're not doing that too, you're like, I don't want to be in this circle anymore. Like I want to be around women who hype each other up and are motivated and optimistic and, things like that. I think it's life-changing for sure.
It's a game changer. I mean, because it's like once you feel that feeling of being able to talk good about yourself and not dismiss not minimize yourself, because that is true. And I will say, and we'll get into this more, but like it is hard for me to receive a compliment. And I think that's something that a lot of women probably, why? But like being able to feel that security and that ease right away pings other areas in your life where that's not happening. And it's so powerful because it allows you to auto correct and like navigate and take the cloudiness out. Like this is not, because you hear it all the time, right? Like take the things out of your life that aren't serving you. But if you aren't experiencing things that are serving you, that can be really hard to do, to determine.
Mm. Yeah, because you have to feel it to know it even exists, to even know that it's out there or that it's an option. Yeah, that totally lands for me. One of the things I want to ask you before we wrap this podcast up is, how do you think, and this is just for any women listening, like how can you find people or nurture friendships that encourage you or hype you up? Like have you had experience with that? What has worked for you? Things like that, just to increase that hype girl in your corner in real time.
So I think that, like, gosh, wow, that's a big question, but I'm going to try to make it a small answer or a short answer. The first thing, so I'm just going to go over the first thing that popped in my mind is you have to be willing to be vulnerable yourself, or be that can be a triggering word. Open, be exposed, be yourself. Like it starts there, because if you don't do that, no one else is going to do it with you. So you have to be willing to start accepting yourself, so that
Mm.
way you can then be yourself around others. And then once you're yourself, it sounds so cliche, other people are going to be their self, and then that kind of opens the pathways. And that alone is a huge statement. Like, for some of us, how do I be myself around other people? Because like those are not things we think we are, right? Or we may think we are ourselves all the time, but when you start actually looking at yourself, you notice walls, facades, different ways, even in the receiving a compliment to a stranger at the grocery store, from a stranger at the grocery store, that we start passively just dismissing who we are, or the things
Mm-hmm.
that the threads that make us. So, and then, yeah, so I think finding, so it can start and look like just that question alone, like, who am I really, and who do I want to be, and what is my why in life, or in who I am, and finding ways, tools, avenues, modalities to explore yourself.
Yeah. Oh, God, I love that. I think trusting yourself. And one of the ways that I have tried to determine like who I am is by judging my energy levels after I interact with someone, or if I'm in a crowd of people. Like, what do I feel like after I get home? Am I drained? Am I excited? Am I motivated? And for me, that's a huge determining factor on who am I pretending to be when I'm around them. Like, if I'm exhausted when I come home, it's because I spent this entire day pretending. And
Yes.
I think in a lot of ways, there is like the real us, who we are at home. If we're lucky that we have a safe space that we can be ourselves when we're at home. But who are we when we're in this space, or when we're alone, or when we don't think anyone's watching, versus who, like the face we put on for public, which is kind of, an ego type of thing. But I also think, that's the face that we were taught as children, that was our presentable face. Like our church clothes type of thing, like dressed up for a certain event, like how we're supposed to act. Like my mom was in sales, and I can remember hearing her voice change when she would get on the phone and thinking, oh, that's what you do. Not that that's a bad thing. She was working, right? But I remember hearing the tone in her voice changing when she answered the phone. And I, as an adult, do the same damn thing, right? And I can remember somebody called me out and was like, "Who was that? Like, who did you just answer the phone for?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's the voice that I answered the phone in, right?" And it's just an example of, and I try really hard not to do that anymore, but it's just an example of how you're taught as a kid that you're supposed to show yourself to the world. And, not, my mom didn't do anything wrong. It was just an example of what I witnessed as a kid. But then there's the part of you that like feels really good and fulfilled. And I think, you talked about exploring modalities. Like, if something interests you, don't wait for somebody to go with you. Don't wait for a friend to sign up. Yeah, just go, right? Like, and I'll share this example too before we wrap up. I I didn't never want to travel alone. Like, my husband traveled a lot for work. I've been married my entire adult life, and which, love him, he is everything, but he traveled a lot for work all the time by himself. And I was so resentful for that. I'm like, I don't get any time alone. Like, I'm either working, and then once we had our daughter, I'm here with her. And he pushed me to go and travel by myself, and it felt like the most foreign, almost forbidden thing, that I'm going on this trip by myself and I don't know anybody, and I'm going to be so uncomfortable trying to make friends. And I remember feeling when I
I
got
want
home.
that, Charli. We need to talk about that feeling more in another
Yeah. Okay,
note.
I agree with that. That's great. I remember coming home after that trip thinking, I've never felt this good. Like, I have never felt this good. And I will say too, the coach in me is always letting other people pour into me. It's just my nature. And it was the first time that I have ever spent any sort of time alone, not trying to find friends, not trying to get people to feel safe and pour into me. I purposely went into that trip not wanting to talk to anybody. I
Mm-hmm.
made it a point not to make conversation with people. And I remember there was this one woman, God bless her, she came up to me and wanted to make friends. And I remember being disappointed because I didn't know how to turn off that people pleaser coaching style. And I couldn't turn her away. And so there was like a whole day there where it changed my experience a little bit for that day because she was like sucking life out of me, which is a terrible way to put it, but that's what it felt like, right? Don't wait for people to do things with you. Like, go out there and do it for yourself. You don't need support. You may feel like you do because you always did, or you always had siblings there or friends there. You don't. And the first time you witness or experience something on your own for the first time like that, I can almost guarantee you that it will change you,
Mm-hmm.
fundamentally change you. And I just think that's an important message. And I loved, even though that was a big question, you answered it perfectly. So thank you for that. Being vulnerable and open about, who you are is the number one way to find people that match that energy, right?
I think
Um,
also, I want to just note, I was thinking it like I should have said also that that person who you are is constantly evolving. So, like, not judging yourself, like giving yourself permission to be changing and to be doing something that is different or that is not the same as it was 5 years ago. Like,
mm,
it's a big part of being vulnerable and open is that that looks different than who I once was. And I don't know who, maybe I don't know. And that's
yeah.
okay.
It's interesting. I say all the time, like, I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't think people were capable of change, right? It comes up in coaching sessions a lot about other people and clients' lives. And, I think the crazy part to wrap your head around is it's possible to change so many parts of yourself while also keeping a lot of the parts the same, right?
Yes.
Like, it is such a multi layered process of change. And it doesn't mean that everything about you changes, that you're a completely different person. It just means you're growing and you're evolving and you're adding more things into your repertoire of ideas and concepts and things like that. Um, yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, who I am today is just an accumulation of all the other women that I have been before now, which is a beautiful thing, right?
yes. Yes. There's like, I was just saying, like, it's just like cooking a meal. Like, you can start with a baseline and add an ingredient, take some out. It doesn't make the dish any better. It can or not, but it can also just change. Like, we look
Mm,
at other things, other areas of life, like cooking, like art, like, different experiences in the world as adaptable or able to change. But when it comes to ourselves, we often really, really fight that change.
mm,
And why? We're like multifaceted, adaptive, growing species. Like,
mm.
why a plant, shifts all year long, and we think it's beautiful and we can't wait for the flowers to spring, and then we think it's really cool when it snows. But if a human does that, I don't
Right.
know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Girl, that could be a whole nother podcast for sure, because we could dive so deep into that. Before we wrap up, because it is the Hype Squad, and part of the reason this like came to be was because of the hype list assignment that I always give my clients. So, rapid fire, I want you to give me one thing that you have accomplished in your life, and I want you to give me one thing that you have overcome in your life to celebrate you.
Okay, what was the first one?
One thing that you've accomplished
Okay.
and one thing that you've overcome.
Oh God, there's so many things.
I'm going to ask you every podcast we record. So just think of something because you'll have lots to share.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna stick with the theme of what we're talking about today. One thing I've accomplished is learning who I am, meeting myself. I remember the exact moment I met myself and like, oh, this is who I am. And that came from traveling alone. Um, So that's one thing that I've accomplished, and I'm going to tie it back into that. One thing I've overcome was the fears around that, because I was a small town girl and I literally was born and raised in Mariana, lived in the same place my entire life, didn't know how to make friends actually, because when you live in a small town and we all like, our preschool picture and our graduation picture, same people. Like, there's a couple that
Yep.
came in and out, but like, you don't. So when I started and I left our small town, there was a lot of fear in me, but also so much fear around me and being pressed into me and spoken to me. And are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you're going to live on a boat? How are you going to be safe? Are you going to, what if all these things happen? Well, you're going to another country. That's not a safe country. Like all these other, so I had to overcome that, how to stay true to what I want to do and who I am without succumbing to all of those other fears that people that I had myself and that other people injected into my way of life.
I love that. I literally could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours and hours, and maybe we will keep talking. Um, I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this and just being in my corner and being my friend. And
Just can I ask you the same question? Like maybe just for this first one?
yeah, of course you can. All right. So, and a nice plot twist. Love that. Love that. You want to host this? Um,
I feel like it's
so
essential.
I love that. So for me, I'm going to say accomplished is putting myself out there in ways that I didn't think I was capable of. And that is like multifaceted. That could be career wise, that could be socially. But I think just learning and doing it that first time and not dying and realizing it's not that hard, it's not that scary, and then doing it again and continuing. And like every time I put my face on social media in any capacity, it's like, I really don't like this. Like, and I'm very vocal about that. I do not like it, but it is part of it. Um, so that's definitely something I've accomplished and overcome is, when I put myself out there for the first time and like started this business Instagram, I was terrified of people judging me and thinking less of me or any sort of the very people pleaser aspect of me was so scared to jump off this cliff into this unknown because I was so concerned primarily with people from my hometown, which is crazy, right? Because I don't even see or talk to most of them ever.
Mhm.
Although they're starting to come back around now that I'm like out there on social media and stuff. But for some reason, I created these villains in my head of thinking, oh my God, they're going to judge me. And then something snapped in me that was like, I don't fucking care. And then I just did it. And then the ironic part is those people that I thought were going to judge me or hate me or not agree with what I was doing, they started showing up for me. They started reaching out to me and are now working with me, some of them in different capacities. And it was such a good reminder of the scary shit is most of the time all in our head. And if we
Mhm.
don't actually put ourselves out there and jump off that cliff, we're never going to know what's on the other side of it. So
Mhm.
that's one of my accomplished. I have a million of them, right? But definitely the ones that kind of pertain to this conversation. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
That was really nice. That little plot twist. Um, all right. Again, I'm so happy that you're here. I cannot wait to do this again. We're going to see your face on here a lot because we have the best conversations. And I'm just so grateful for the universe bringing us back together.
Yes. So much more. So much more. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to spend this time with you. It's like
I
I never
know.
we're also like setting aside time to spend together. And that's a pretty big deal.
It's like a day date, right?
Yeah.
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 Yay for day dates. I know, right? We got childcare, kids aren't in the back. Like it's a whole thing. All right, Cynthia, I love you. Everyone, we're so excited to see you. I'll put all of your information in the show notes where people can find you and follow your journey. And we're going to see you on here very soon. So thanks, girl.
Thank you.